الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So this is our pre-Ramadan lecture. Generally what we do, those of you who have attended lectures in the past, know that we often talk about the legal do's and don'ts of fasting Ramadan. But alhamdulillah, this year we had the Ramadan intensive, and we covered a lot of that time. So we covered Imam Anas and Imam Qais covered all these those of fasting. How many people attended the Ramadan intensive? Show of hands. 4. Okay, that's good. And that information pretty much is the same every year. You're fasting now for years. You're familiar with most of the rules of fasting. So today I wanted to do a brief presentation on merits of Ramadan, why fasting is important, why we should make every effort possible to prepare for Ramadan. As we well know, Ramadan is a time where we are taxed, particularly in these months. A lot of the kids are still in school. We still are working. And so it requires that we dig a little deeper, to also obey the command of Allah to fast Ramadan. So I wanted to give you some encouragement today, and share with you the benefits, the tremendous spiritual benefits of fasting. But before we get into that, everybody going to take not even 5 minutes. We're take a couple of minutes. And I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to think about the question. And I'm going to ask you to share, if you're willing to share, your answer. So the question is, what does Ramadan mean to you? What does Ramadan mean? We're going to take a couple of minutes just to reflect on that, because we all have a personal experience with Ramadan. So we'll take a couple of minutes. If you want to write your answer down, reflection you can, providing that you promise not to write dissertation or a khutbah. What does Ramadan mean to you? Okay, so we're gonna get some feedback now from everybody. Is anybody prepared to share? Prepared to share? Yes, Sister Amina. Yes, Sister Amina. Could you raise your voice a bit? Raise your voice a bit. Alibu.
And more in touch, more in what I should be doing. And therefore I feel like I'm closer to Allah and doing things that I should be doing. More dedicated.
More, you said more devoted?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So Ramadan is an opportunity to recharge.
Yeah, pretty much like you said, like you said, like reevaluation of like how much like go around people like participating how close to that, how like that throughout the year, to see, I think through the charge, and I look at how much has not dissipated.
Right. The spiritual charge. So again, there's that sense of connecting and recharging. That's good. Anybody else? That's good. Anybody else?
Yes. I see it. It's my chance to reconnect myself with Allah, spiritually. You come closer to Allah. I think your theme has been your relationship, and it's a chance to strengthen my relationship. Plus the other thing is during Ramadan, somehow or another become more sensitive, and I think Allah opens you up to that you don't normally. Different signs that you don't know.
You become more sensitive. We're going to revisit that. That's very good. Yes. Yes.
So what else said, shutting down all of the right? And my patient
So how does shutting down the distractions help you?
Because now instead of when I'm watching, I need this check, So my focus is more so when we in the check, I'm committed to the minister. I'm not worried about track.
Okay. Excellent. Awesome.
For me, it's an opportunity to come closer to the source of my creation in a manner unlike any other time. I understand fasting during this month is one of the actions that you take looks at us. He gives us so much more here. This is the one thing I do. Not that he needs anything, but I feel like I'm giving back.
That you're giving back. Okay. Very good. Anybody else? People in the rack back. Anything to say? Go ahead. Yeah. Patience. Very good. What about patience? All right, so it's fair probably, I would surmise, to say Ramadan is a form of exercising, right? And it's a form of exercising for the soul. You have something you have your hand up? I think, right?
No, I just want to say I agree with everybody, and my answer was just short. Ramadan is a beautiful month for me because I can resurface and revive within, and myself and work on more mercy and become more merciful.
Work on mercy and become more merciful. Very good. Go ahead, Brother Salim.
Along with everything everybody else said, Ramadan is one of the things, along with the other four pillars, is a confirmation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a confirmation of my faith, and it has to increase my faith, because when you look at all the aspects of Ramadan, there's nothing about it that's bad for you. So it has to be Allah.
Right.
And that's one of the things that's my faith is.
All right, very good. And keep in mind, there's no wrong answer. If you didn't have an answer, it doesn't mean you don't know what Ramadan is about. The point that I want to emphasize is that Ramadan, for all of us, is a very special time because it's a very special connection. We can make very special connections to Allah during the month of Ramadan. And in the hadith, the Prophet, peace be upon him, says that Allah said, and what type of hadith is this? We say that the Prophet said that Allah said. Qudsi hadith, which is what? A divine hadith, which means that
it's not part of the Quran.
Yes. What is a divine hadith?
Straight from Allah to the messenger of Allah.
That's the Quran.
And yeah,
You said yeah?
because there's a distinction, but
Right. What? So who remembers? Some of us learned this a little while ago.
right.
What is the difference between a divine hadith and a hadith?
The divine hadiths are hadiths that are narrated to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that are not part of the Quran.
So, say that again?
The divine hadith qudsis are hadiths that are related by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that are not part of
Right.
the Quran.
Okay. So wording like the Prophet said that Allah said, right, in a hadith. Allah said. And there are many popular hadiths like this. The hadith about avoiding oppression is an example that comes quickly to mind. But in a divine hadith, Allah said that all of the deeds of the son of Adam, or the child of Adam, is for their benefit. Except for the fast, he said, it's for me, and I will reward appropriately for it. Now, of course, we know that Allah is not saying that the benefit of the fast is for him. He's saying that a part of what's being communicated in that hadith is that the depth of commitment that it takes to fast is an indication of faith. So that means that when you fast, you can fake many things. You can fake prayer, right? You can go through the movements. Nobody knows what you're saying but you and Allah, right? You can fake Hajj. You can fake charity. All of these actions or these deeds, you can pretend you're doing something that you really aren't doing, except for fasting. And what it means is when you choose to go without food and drink and to abstain from all of the things, as Sakina said, that Allah is permissible for you outside of Ramadan from the beginning of daybreak to the sunset. And then we will on Wednesday, we will observe the fast. If you do this consciously, this is an indication of faith and an indication of sincerity. Allah will reward you for that sincerity. Right? And so, a part of what we're going to, the blessing of being able to observe the fast. It's a tremendous blessing, right? And I took a little side note because sometimes we aren't able to observe the fast. And I've heard people over the years, when Ramadan comes and they fast for sometimes it's ladies because they can't fast during certain parts of the month. And sometimes it's gentlemen who want to fast, but they might have to take medication. And they can't interrupt their medication. And I've had like people say, I really want to fast. Because people connect to fast in a very intimate way. Right? It's one of those forms of worship that, as I think you said, Brother, it pulls something out of you. It takes you deeper inside of yourself. If you observe it properly, you will reap the spiritual benefits of it. Because the spiritual benefits, patience, one of the things that were said, I mean, that the Prophet ﷺ described fasting as half of patience, or patience is half of faith, and fasting is half of patience. So one of the ways that you learn patience is learning to control yourself. And that is the big secret of the fast. I would be remiss if I didn't remind all of us gathered here today that, you know, we should always be mindful when we gather, when we come together, to remember, we should try to remember that there are people who came before us. There are our predecessors in the Quran, and Allah talks about the predecessors. When we read the Sirah, the Prophet's biography, we read about who? The Sahaba. And we refer to the Sahaba as the predecessors. And oftentimes, I try to call our attention to the fact that we should not, in remembering the ancestors or the predecessors who came before us, take this leap all the way back to Medina, because when we do that, we're committing an injustice, not knowingly. But we're not remembering the people who came directly before. Because it was those people, it was their prayers and their sacrifices that we are beneficiaries of. So those people fasted Ramadan and we're about. So those people fasted Ramadan and we're about to fast. And they prayed for did things, and we are beneficiaries. And we are beneficiaries of those things, whether we're conscious of that. So always we should strive to remember that. Always we should to offer a strive to remember that. We should pray and ask and to offer a prayer. Right? And Allah says to reward them and ask Him for whatever they did, right? And to reward them. And a part of that is whatever they did for us, because we want someone to do that for us. Is important. The people who are after us, want someone to do that for us now. When you want them to who are after us, because otherwise, if you have no spiritual legacy, I'm referring to because otherwise, if you have no spiritual legacy, it's easy to be forgotten in the spiritual legacy. Then it's easy to be forgotten and gone. People forget about you, right? Like when people aren't to be shamed or blamed for that, that's a natural thing. And you remember those who are present. That's a natural thing. But the way that we are, you remember train those who are spiritually in Islam. But the way that we are through certain trainings spiritually, we're called to remember the spiritual legacy. Through certain because the spiritual legacy, we're called to remember the most spiritual legacy. Because the spiritual legacy connects us to the most we really are. Because it connects us to who we really are. To say that, so we get that. Okay. Oh, and I have this slide here upon the citing of the Crescent in the Sunnah. Oh, and I have this slide here upon the citing of the Crescent in the Sunnah with security, faith, peace, and submission upon us. This is one of the peace and submission prayers from the tradition. This is that one when you either prayers from when you're informed that Ramadan is here. you either,
that you ask
when you're
Allah
informed that Ramadan is here, let Ramadan find you in a state of security, let Ramadan physically find you in a state as well as spiritually, both that you're physically secure as well as spiritually, that you have faith, that your faith is secure, that you have peace internally, right? That you're not confused, that you have peace conflicted internally, right? And submission. That you're not confused or conflicted, that you find yourself in a state of submission. And submission, that your life priority is to do what Allah wants you to do. Life priority is to do what Allah wants you to do. I put this slide here also because, you know, I put this slide here also because I understood from Imam Anas that Imam Qais gave understood from Friday Anas. And he mentioned that, inshallah, we will begin the fast Friday on Wednesday. And he mentioned that, inshallah, we will begin the fast. He had a response on Wednesday. That's a typical response. He had a response. But how do you know it's going to be Ramadan on Wednesday? That's a typical response, right? But how do you know it's going to be Ramadan on Wednesday? Because people are accustomed to engaging. And I say it's typical because people are accustomed to engaging. That's what happens. You know, Ramadan comes around. Y'all know what happens. That's what happens. When the moon side comes around, y'all know what happens. And often when that question is asked, the moon side? Yes or no is not enough. And because often when that question is asked, yes, where was it not enough? Because if you say yes, you say a particular place geographically, then what? That's not valid. You say a particular place geographically, then what? Engaging in this that's not valid. Cycle of confusion. And we found ourselves in quite frankly is cycle one, unnecessary. That two, it takes away from what one is unnecessary. Two, it takes away from because Allah doesn't need the timing to be exactly 100% right. Because Allah doesn't need the timing. Why doesn't Allah need exactly 100% right? Why? Why doesn't Allah need that? More than that. Why doesn't Allah need that? So if you look at the little imsak sheet, why doesn't Allah need the imsak? So if that's when you start fasting 505, and it says, so if you start fasting, you start fasting 5:10. So if you start fasting 5:10, now you're in violation.
More concerned with your
and Allah doesn't need that sheet. Why? You're getting warm. Somebody else. Why doesn't Allah need the timing to be exact?
There is no time.
You're getting warm. Right. Because Allah doesn't need time. Allah created time. We need time. Right. We need the time to regulate our worship. Allah created time. But when we stand for the accounting, we're not going to be asked, so what when we stand for the accounting, did you start your fast? We're not going to be asked, well, what sighting did you go with? Did you start your fast? The question that we're going to be asked well, what is, sighting did you go with? For? No, the question that we're going to be asked is, did you fast for? That's what we're going to be judged for. That's what we're going to be asked. Whether we observe we're going to be judged the worship. Not what time, whether we observe, not whether the sighting was from Saudi, not what time, or Yemen, not or Nigeria, the sighting was from Saudi, or Great Britain, or Sheikh Nigeria, or the brothers around Great Britain, or the brothers across town, said, or the brothers around the corner, or the brothers across town, right? But it's not the point of what we. So what we did here, right? And I don't mind repeating this because I think when we first what we did here, Imam Qais Curry, I don't mind repeating this. We had a meeting when we first made the decision. And we told everybody we were wrong, but we had a meeting. And what we did was we told everybody we used to go by what's called the local. And what we did was we used to go by simply means is that and what that simply means for a sighting, a verifiable sighting, we look for a sighting, a verifiable sighting in Canada. Right? North America. And as long as that a sighting was reported from a reliable source, right? We went and as long as that a sighting was reported from a reliable source, years ago, we went with that. We used to go with the sighting from Mecca, Saudi Arabia, because that's what everybody was doing, and we didn't want to disrupt what was the norm in the community with some new stuff, right? But later on, when we got people to understand the legal basis, because all of this stuff is based on legal principles. So you cite the moon, but there's a way that you cite the moon. There's a criterion for citing the moon. Right? You look for a specific thing, right? The person that gives the report of the sighting, they can't just be anybody. You can't just go with a random report, right? But in 2000, was it 14, 15?
We're in 18 now, 15.
2015, we found out about a conference that took place in Istanbul, Turkey. And it was a conference of Muslim scholars, jurists, astronomers. It was a huge conference around whether or not accepting the astronomical calculation, meaning that the moon would still be sighted, but the documentation of the progress of the moon was what you would go with. And the majority of the scholars there, and I'm really convincing what was said, but they said that this is agreeable and acceptable according to Islamic law. And so we decided that in order to withdraw ourselves from the confusion and participation in the confusion, because even though we had a system, and we wrote what our system was, and everybody knew what it was, we still experience people within the same family sometimes fighting over the validity of a sighting. So the husband goes to Quba, the imam said Ramadan is Tuesday. The wife goes to another masjid, and the imam there said Ramadan is Wednesday. And people still, and that's not the purpose of Ramadan. Right? And so Imam Qais was asked a question about Dalil, as far as I was told. Like, what's the Dalil for that? And this questioning is problematic, not because it's a question. You can ask the question, but you have to know what you're asking for. Right? So he could have given the Dalil, but the person asking the question, what are you going to do with it? Unless you're a student of fiqh, of Islamic law, or a person who has studied Islamic law, and you know Islamic law, if I gave you the Dalil, then what would you do with it? And I say that only because this legal stuff occurs in books of law. And then scholars study the books of law and they render religious opinions. And this is not an easy exercise. It's a very intense exercise, right? So to remove that process, that's our responsibility. That's not the community's responsibility, right? The community's responsibility is to ask us, and then our responsibility is to give the best answer based on our investigation, our research, so that the community can continue to function, right? So, based off of that, Ramadan for us will begin on Wednesday, right? And we could have a talk about, again, we could revisit this issue, but it's best now, because part of it, sometimes people, when you say, okay, I'm going to accept the validity of the astronomical calculation, they hear, so we're no longer following the Sunnah. That's what they hear. Because if somebody asks you for a dalil, then they're separating between science and dalil, even though you can use science as dalil, right? So it might be time to revisit that issue, but not today. But I wanted to bring that up because it's something that happened in the community, and I want you to be clear about what your message is doing, right? So it's not just, we're opening up the Inquirer, and oh yeah, it says here, so that's what we're, no, right? Muslim astronomers have designed calendars right? And they make the determination. And we trust them when we follow what they say, and that's all you do. So getting back to Ramadan. One of the things that would be very beneficial for us is to understand what Ramadan is. So the definition, Ramadan is the practice of self-control or self-discipline. That's really what it is, observing the fast. Now, of course, we know that Ramadan has a definition that would sound something like abstaining from food and drink and other permissible activities during the daytime hours during the month of Ramadan. Right? That's the legal definition. But in attempting to define what we're actually doing, when we do that, we are practicing self-control or self-discipline. And so the way, and a couple of you said that in your reflections when you said that, you minimize the distractions, right? One person said. So when you engage in this self-discipline and you minimize the distraction of eating, because eating can become a distraction. And how can eating become a distraction? Eating can become a distraction because if you are feeding, food and drink feed the ego, which is the animal part of our existence. So so our appetite and our desires are all rooted in the ego and the animal part of who we are. And whenever we feed that part of us, we are blocking the spiritual side. This is why it is strongly encouraged in the Sunnah that we observe fasting as a way to spiritual enlightenment. Because it's as if when we fast, we're removing barriers that will help us to see with more clarity. To hear, you said something about being more sensitive. That is the sensitivity. It's a spiritual sensitivity. And, by Allah, I've talked to people who have had this experience. They get more clarity during the month of Ramadan. A clarity that they don't have when they're engaged in eating and drinking regularly, constantly, because it's a cloudiness. The food and the drink does what it's supposed to do in terms of nourishing the body, but it doesn't necessarily do what it's supposed to do in terms of nourishing the soul. That's what fasting does. Right? So, when you practice the self-control, right? Sakina, you mentioned patience. Well, how do you become more patient? The root of patience is self-control. You have to control the anger. You have to control the upsetment, right? And so fasting is this reminder or this way that Allah gives us to do that. In the Quran, Allah tells us, O you who have believed, fasting has been prescribed upon you as it was prescribed upon those before you, in the hopes that you become more conscious of Allah. More conscious. So in the Arabic, Allah says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Who knows what that word comes from? تَتَّقُونَ. What Arabic word does that come from? It comes from taqwa. It comes from taqwa. And we're all familiar. This is a part of Muslim lingo, right? What is taqwa?
Trusting.
Full trusting. Someone else. What is taqwa? Fear of Allah. Who said that? Okay. What, is that it? Is that just, what is taqwa? Excuse me? A reverential fear. Okay. Right? So, and all of these are correct. And Allah tells us that we fast in the hopes that we become more, we have more taqwa. And why is more taqwa important? Because we always need to remember our reality, who Allah is and who we are. And Ramadan is the time when we remember that the most, as we'll see, right? So fasting has been prescribed upon you as it was prescribed upon those who come before. And that is the unique thing about Ramadan. Because other people fast. You know, in the Christian tradition, they observe a fast of sorts. You know, the Jewish tradition, they fast some days, depending on, you know, what, you know, who they belong to, the group. And spiritual people fast, and, you know, fasting is healthy, it's good for you. You know, intermittent fasting is a thing now in physical activity and bodybuilding, and, right? So fasting is something that, but in Islam, in the Quran, Allah calls us to this fast because this fast has a spiritual purpose. And the spiritual purpose of the fast of Ramadan is that we become more conscious. We become more conscious. Also, Allah says the month of Ramadan, during which the Quran was revealed, as a source of guidance for all humanity and as a distinguisher of truth and clarity. So, one of the things that is unique about the month of Quran, the month of Ramadan, is the fact that the Quran was revealed during the month of Ramadan. And the purpose of the Quran is to what? To be a source of guidance from Allah. So if you want to know in a general sense what Allah, your creator, wants from you, the created, He tells you in the Quran. And this is why we try to read the Quran during the month of Ramadan, so that we can reconnect to what Allah wants from us. Because when we come into the world, everybody wants something from us, even ourselves. When you look in the mirror, your reflection says, Vernon, I want this, 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 and this from you. But your soul may say something different, and usually it does. Because your soul, with attention, is focused on what Allah wants from you. Right? So, the Quran is a source of guidance for all of humanity, and it's important that Muslims remember this. And sometimes, you know, we think the Quran is just for us, right? Allah says it's the word of Allah for everybody. And as a distinguisher of truth and clarity. Two very important things about the Quran. That if you want to know the truth of things, even if you don't like what it says, Allah tells you the truth of things in the Quran, and He gives you clarity. So where there's confusion, maybe in any book that you read, any wisdom that you hear, there's clarity always in the Quran. Right? Even, and this means even when you read a verse that you don't quite grasp right away, you might need to write down a question or ask a question. That doesn't mean that the verse isn't clear. It means your understanding of the verse isn't clear. Those are two different things. Because Allah speaks clearly in the Quran. And the thing that Allah is most clear about in the Quran is what? Who can tell me? What is the thing that Allah is most clear about in the Quran? even more, something that he's more clear about than that. He is God and we are not. He is the creator and we are the created. And the essence of Islam is that. And that is the beginning of the soul awakening, so to speak. That we get clear about that. So when we talk about a relationship with Allah, we start with the assumption or the premise or the truth that Allah is the creator. Because that's indisputable truth. He made me. I didn't make myself. I have a mom, I have a dad. Allah rest their souls in peace, but Allah made me the way He made all of us. Right? And this is a part of the clarity of the message of the words of the Quran. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, so let me go back real quick. So when we read the Quran during the month of Ramadan, when we, make the intention to fast the month of Ramadan, we are in fact engaging in a very high level of spiritual commitment, right? That we are highly rewarded for. The Prophet, peace be upon him, says, the 5 ritual prayers, Friday to Friday, and Ramadan to Ramadan, these remove sins so long as major ones are avoided. And again, this is for the spiritually conscious, and I don't mean that the way it sounds. That means that people who are looking for an opportunity to nourish the soul, we're being told in the hadith when those times are. So first, you have the 5 ritual prayers. So when we are neglectful of the prayers, we're neglecting our souls. Which is why we should be mindful of the prayers and diligent about the prayers. Friday to Friday. That means from every Jumu'ah, every Friday, and it's a part of why, so those of you that are on Facebook and you see me post the Friday blessings, Jumu'ah Mubarak, it's for that reason, because Friday is, in fact, a blessed day, because it's the day when we are called to reflect. And we have one of those a week. Every Friday is that. And Ramadan to Ramadan. And then we have a whole month. Right? And so a part of what we're being gifted is this opportunity to cleanse ourselves, to reconnect by removing the stuff that needs to be removed. The biggest distraction is that we believe that there's anything that we need other than Allah. That's the biggest distraction. Easily uttered, very hard to live because of distractions. And the biggest distraction after that is our ego. Right? The Prophet, peace be upon him, also said, he said these things, these times, remove sins so long as major ones are avoided. And what that means is that if a major sin is committed, then you have to do extra stuff. It doesn't mean that it's not forgiven. It just means you have to do extra stuff. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, its beginning is mercy, its middle is forgiveness, and its end is freedom from the fire. So the beginning of Ramadan is mercy, right? And what we need to do in the first 10 days of Ramadan is really reflect on mercy. What is mercy? Right? And you'll find that when you reflect on mercy, right, you'll find things like kindness and compassion. Right? because it's an attribute of kindness. When you show some mercy to someone, you have mercy on someone, right? And so we should ask ourselves, well, how can I be kinder? How can I practice kindness? Because if I want the mercy, and if I want to show mercy, you have to start with, you know, the most basic part of that, which is kindness, showing kindness, right? Then he said the middle of it is forgiveness. So the next 10 days we reflect on what forgiveness is and understanding what forgiveness is. Because oftentimes we think, we meaning all of us, where our brains work, is that when I forgive something, you know, I am letting someone do something to me. But really the secret of forgiveness is when I forgive something, I'm releasing something off of me. And if I have someone who's violated me, when I release it from me, where's it going? It's going to them. It's no longer my problem, you know, the anger, the upsetment, all this weight of the deed, depending, of course, on what it is. I'm releasing that. And I'm leaving that affair to Allah. And there's, you know, we can have a whole conversation about, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exacts justice all the time. So this is why we have to be careful with prayers. Right? So if someone, in the tradition, we're taught not to pray against people unless it's in the worst of circumstances. And part of the wisdom of that is when oppressed people pray against someone, Allah answers that prayer. So part of what we have to, you know the saying, be careful what you pray for? Probably the worst thing is if you pray against someone and then Allah answers the prayer and you see the answer. And it bothers you because it's like, well, I didn't mean for all that to happen. Right? Man, you know, but why? Because no one gets away with anything. Because Allah is ever watching, all knowing, you know. So, how about what? Praying for someone? Ah, that's the beauty. But that's a whole nother conversation. That's deep spiritual love. The Lord grant us that. And then the end of Ramadan is freedom from the fire. And just to give you a heads up, inshallah, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to attempt to jump into this area of explaining what it means to ask Allah for freedom from the hellfire. To ask Allah for freedom from the hellfire. What does that mean?
So the end of Ramadan?
Yeah, the last 10 days.
Okay.
The first 10 are mercy.
Right.
The middle 10 are forgiveness. The last 10 are freedom from the bondage of the hellfire. In the tradition, meaning the spiritual tradition, it has been transmitted that an obligatory act of worship during Ramadan will gain the reward of 70 such acts at other times. Example, it's time for asr. You make asr. Normally, asr, you get the reward of 10. I think it's mentioned, right? But during Ramadan, you get 70. So the obligatory acts are rewarded times 70. And then the voluntary acts are rewarded like obligatory acts. So the 2 sunnah that you make that you would normally get, let's say 1 unit of reward for, during Ramadan you get the reward of the obligatory act. That's amazing. Because this represents an opportunity, if you think about it that way. So we want blessings, this is the opportunity to get the blessings. Right? So this is why we're encouraged that even if we're not very diligent outside of Ramadan about the ritual prayers, during Ramadan, we should be very diligent about the ritual prayers for this fact alone. So, what should we try to do to gain some of these things, some of these tremendous and amazing blessings? So first of all, we should read what Allah says to us about Ramadan and believe it. Believe what the Prophet, peace be upon him, says to us about the hadith, about Ramadan in the hadith. And then we should make a solid intention to get as much as we can. Now, in that sense, or having said that, oftentimes people, there's such a thing as trying to do too much during the month of Ramadan. You can burn yourself out because you're already fasting. You're already missing sleep. And you don't want to feel guilty about things that you just don't have the strength to do. So you like looking at Sister So-and-so, and you see her, and you're imagining she's doing all of these great things. And I want to do that too. But you may not be able to do those things. And the other reality is that everybody's different, right? And something that I want to remind us of. So everybody has like personal challenges. Some people have physical challenges. Some people, when they go without food, it weakens them more than other people because their body metabolizes a certain way, right? So, you know, me, the imam, I shouldn't guilt the person that's like that by saying, brother, you know it's Ramadan. Are you making those extra, are you doing? No. The encouragement is that you do what you can. You know yourself. So know what you can do. But in order for you to determine what you can do, you have to think about it. So that's the importance of the niyyah, or the intention. That you think about, you know yourself, right? Some people don't function well when they miss sleep. So the point of Ramadan is not to cause harm, right? When you're harming yourself trying to stay up and do all this stuff that you may physically not be able to do. So there is no sin or shame in not doing the things, or a lot of the things that you can't do, because you are going to focus on other things that you can do better. And in that, Allah will reward you for that. Right? Sometimes reading the Quran can pose a challenge. Right? And I forgot to bring it, but there's a translation that I want to encourage everybody. I think it's called, I'll let everybody know. But it's paperback. It costs $8 on Amazon. It's about the size of this book. And it's simple English. Because oftentimes, and I know back in the day, our predecessors, may Allah have mercy on them, they had only Yusuf Ali, usually. Yusuf Ali or Muhammad Ali, the Maulana Quran, right? And both of them used the Queen's English. Was the King's English?
King's.
The King, the Queen, right? And that was a hard read. Your Lord saith thus. Requiteth ye? Like, what is ye? Right?
What
and I can imagine people sitting there like, okay, here we go. What does ye mean?
With the dictionary.
You pull out the dictionary, you might find it in there. You might have to have a like Webster Old Edition. Or Oxford, right? That's just, but alhamdulillah, we live in a time now, and I guess educators would say people back then were better educated than we are, because they read it, nonetheless. But we have Qur'ans that are translated in plain standard American English. Get one of those. If you're a person who has trouble reading, because some people have reading issues, right? Then break up your reading of the Quran in manageable portions. Like you'll hear us from the minbar say, read a 30th, right? That's encouragement. But you may not be able to read 25 pages at once. You may only be able to read 2 pages. So work out a schedule where you break it up across the day, right? And read what you can, right? And usually the reading that you will engage in is not necessarily a reading of reflection. So if you're a person who's easily distracted by what you're reading, remind yourself that you can read for reflection, but to get the reward of reading the entire book, you can make notes and read through, right? And then later on you can refer to your notes. Okay, so try to read the entire Quran is an encouragement. Alhamdulillah, we've been blessed in this masjid. We've been praying Taraweeh here for over 30 years. I was a young punk. Literally. When I first started the Taraweeh. And alhamdulillah, Allah's, we've been able to do that consistently. And we're striving to create a new generation of reciters because that has to happen. We have Dr. Ahmed, but Dr. Ahmed is in another part of the world being a doctor, right? So we need more people who can recite the Quran because that is one of the traditions that has to continue. It must continue, right? And you can do your part by, for yourself spiritually, by trying to read the Quran, the entire Quran, right? From cover to cover. So if that's from Sister Shadia, from Fatiha all the way to Nas, 114 surahs, right? Chapters. How many verses?
6,000.
Over 6,000, right? Close to 6,500. So use that number to break it up, and you'll figure it out. Participate in the Taraweeh, which are the night prayers. This is encouragement again. The night prayers are not easy. And I tell people, like, when we stand up there and pray, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's spiritual stuff, there's physical stuff. So when you guys see me, I'm sweating, because it's a very physical thing, right? I tell people it's like I ran 2 miles when we recite. And it's not easy for you, right? Part of why we do 20 rak'ah and we break up the prayer is so that we can have the movement. So that you're not getting stiff, waiting. The only time you get stiff in the prayer is when we do tahajjud. And those of you who pray the tahajjud, you know that the rak'ah, the standing is long, your feet start throbbing. You might start saying, when is he gonna, okay, right here. Allah, no, not yet. Not yet, okay. I thought I knew this surah, right? That's tahajjud, right? And we do it that way because that's the way it should be done. No more, no less. And we're not trying to prove anything when we stand up there, because if I had my choice, I would read shorter surahs, but some of the Quran is long. And we recite the long parts the way we recite the short parts. So you do what you can. If you can't make all 20, make some of them. It takes a commitment. And it takes a commitment from us. Because like you, we work all day. Recently, we've been modifying our work schedule because I'm getting old, right? Can't do what I used to do. I'd work 10 hours, hop on SEPTA, and come here and lead the prayer. I still have energy, right? Now it's a little different, so but we come, and we once we commit to do it, we're here from the beginning to the end. We don't have an expectation that everybody will do what we do. Some people do. Some of the brothers and the sisters hang with us, right? And some people it's too much, and it's okay. But try to make some of it. If you can't do it every day, pick some days and stick to those days. Because the reward of the night prayer, the prophet said, is that it erases the slate. It cleans the slate. Okay? Give charity often. And Ramadan is when we exercise that giving muscle. Because giving charity is a part of getting back to mercy and kindness. A part of that is giving, right? And when you think about giving charity, don't always think about strangers. Because oftentimes, we think only charity is only for strangers. No. There's a saying that we have, charity begins at home. Right? So we think about charity in this way, and we're giving to those closest to us. There's tremendous reward in that as well. Especially if we make the intention of giving charity. Make as many voluntary prayers as you can. So I mentioned being diligent about the obligatory prayers. Add some voluntary prayers. 2 rak'ah, or 4, or more. Right? And then, as I mentioned, be diligent about the obligatory prayers. Try not to overeat. And I know it's tempting. Believe me. And when I say that, and some of you have heard me say it from the minbar, and it sounds like I'm like casting judgment. No. Really, I understand. Ramadan, I don't know what happens, but all of the spreads come out during Ramadan. And people get real creative with the iftars. Right? And people will have a rack of lamb, they'll have veal, they'll have filet mignon, right? They'll have a lobster, and all of this rich, heavy food. Then the Imam said in the khutbah to go pray, but I can't even move. Right? I can't move. So try not to overeat. Why? Because 2 things. One, you defeat the purpose of the fast. So when you overeat, well, first of all, when you fast, your stomach shrinks. So when you force your stomach to stretch again, that's not good for your body. Right? And then number 2, the point of the fast is for you to connect, to become more sensitized to some things, like what it really means to be hungry. Maybe an insight is, sometimes when I'm hungry, that's just something, because I'm accustomed to eating as opposed to me really being hungry. Because your body will demonstrate that it can survive on less food than you think. Your body will demonstrate that. And then you should regulate your phone and internet behavior if you're on the internet. The phone behavior, meaning you don't have to take every phone call, especially if it's some nonsense. Somebody's calling you with it. And if it weren't Ramadan, you might have something to say about whatever's being said on the other line, on the other end. But because it's Ramadan, I'm really not comfortable having this conversation right now. Right? Because you want to be responsible for the words that come out of your mouth. The internet, and we live in the age of social media, and Facebook is one of the places where people show up. May Allah help us. You don't know if it's them or their demon, or you don't know who it is, right? Sometimes on Facebook, because there's a strong temptation to really say stuff, right? Try to regulate that and control that. Almost done. What you should control, your tongue, right? Avoiding the obvious, of course, lying, backbiting, spreading gossip, using bad language, that's obvious, right? Like to imagine a cussing faster, right? You're fasting and you're cussing, right? Or you're fasting and, you know, like, you gotta be mindful of what you're doing. You're fasting, so you should also be abstaining from certain things. Your consumption of spiritually objectionable things. What I mean by that is things like turning off the television more. You know, not that it's haram for you to watch TV during Ramadan, but that you are more conscious of what you're watching, which we should be anyway, but that's a whole nother, I keep y'all here till midnight with my theories about that stuff, but what's being shown to us on those screens, right? And you try to control that, and then eating publicly if you're not fasting. And this is really just being, like even courteous. And, you know, so if you're a person who doesn't have to fast, or you can't fast, you know, don't come to the mosque on Friday, everybody fasting, you got to hold it, right? Because you know we're going to feel some kind of way, right? But even the people who aren't Muslim, who know that Muslims are supposed to be fasting, they know it's Ramadan. Like now, 2018, that's on the ticker line on CNN. Ramadan began, you know, so if you're walking down the street, you're a Muslim, people know you're a Muslim, people at your job know you're a Muslim, you're eating lunch or whatever, like just be mindful of that, you know. It's a good thing, it's not a bad thing. And then your anger. And those of us that have anger issues, Ramadan is the best time to make you ask the question, what am I really angry about? But what am I, is it really worth all of this? You know, Ramadan is a good time to ask that. And so that's the end of the presentation. I went a little over what I intended to do, but I wanted to cover as much as possible. Does anyone have any questions? Before so we broke with what we normally do. We have food today. This food is a gift from the Imams, myself, Imam Anas, and Imam Qais, to share with everybody. It's probably a little cold. But Imam Anas did his job. The roti was hot when he brought it here. So we're going to have some food. Does anybody have any questions first? Because if not, then myself and you help me out. Yeah, we're going to serve you all some food. So no questions, brothers, young folk. Y'all going to be fasting and going to school, right? Somebody might ask you, your fasting is hot. It's hot. Aren't you thirsty?
Yeah.
You know what the answer to that is?
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, I'm hot.
Right. Or the answer is duh. Aren't you hungry? Come on. Yeah, Brother Sonny.
Me and one of the other brothers here going on a fishing trip at the end of this month.
Uh-huh.
It was a trip that was planned from October, already paid for.
Right.
And I don't think we were aware that it was during Ramadan. Now, we already asked an opinion on this question, but I wanted to see what you had to say. We were questioning the intentional breaking of the fast. Because we have to travel to Massachusetts, plus we're going to get on a boat and all of that. We were thinking about not fasting because of all that we had to do for this trip.
Right.
What we were advised is that it would not be an intentional breaking of the fast, but if you're physically possible, you should fast.
But what?
If you're physically possible, you should fast.
So what does that mean to you?
To me, that means we're going to catch some fish and I'm going to fast.
Right. And that's really the answer for, you know, without, you know, if it's a trip of leisure, like a vacation or anything like that, then the recommendation is that you postpone it if you can. If you can't, like you said, in this case, the plans were already made, it's paid for, then you should fast, right? Now, if during the trip you feel like, you know, I'm having a problem, then you can always break your fast. But you should make the intention to fast. Okay? And then, because I don't think the quality of the trip will change much, because you're not eating, you know, drinking.
Might help.
And then on the boat, it might help. And then on the boat, you might see some stuff that you wouldn't see if you were eating, right? Because you're more sensitive.
And then to a robber, you gotta